With the release of Evil Dead Rise, it got me thinking about horror movie sequels, and the fact that there's a lot of horror movies out there that deserve a sequel or a continuation to their franchise that just haven't received them yet. Whether that be standalone movies that I think warrant the potential for a continuation of the story, or films that maybe when they originally came out didn't perform as well but have potential for an interesting continuation. So in this video, I'm giving you 10 horror movies that I think deserve a sequel. Let's get controversial. Coming in at number 10 is Urban Legend from 1998. This is a cult classic movie at this point that I don't think was well received whatsoever when it initially came out, and that's understandable because it's honestly not that great. It was trying to capitalize on the success of the Scream franchise, but never reached that level. But nonetheless, I do think a sequel would be interesting for this one. The idea of having this masked figure commit a bunch of murders based off these urban legends fits well in any setting, really. And I think even if this was in some ways a requel to where it sort of reboots the franchise while sort of expanding on the same idea, maybe acknowledging the events that happened in the first movie. I understand that there's already a sequel to it, and that one's even worse than the original, but I feel like it could build on it with modern technology, with modern storytelling, and actually give us a pretty decent film. It warrants a lot of interesting possibilities with new characters and maybe the same killer just going on this spree of committing these crimes based off urban legends. I think it would work. At number 9 is John Carpenter's Christine. Again, another cult classic that I quite enjoy myself. I think there's a lot to love about this movie. While it's cheesy and over the top, I think there's enough there that, again, it could expand into a modern setting and provide some very fun, gory kills. Just having this car that's possessed by some demon go around killing a bunch of people, maybe finding a new owner who, at that point, crap hits the fan and it goes wild. And even if people aren't necessarily aware of the original movie or aren't huge fans of it, it might draw people in, and actually, because of a reboot or a sequel, would encourage others to go back to the original John Carpenter movie, because I do think that there's a lot to love about it. But I also feel like another one wouldn't be too bad. At number 8 is Zack Snyder's Dawn of the Dead. Say what you want about this remake, I've always been a big fan of it. I think it did a great job at sort of re-envisioning George A. Romero's original classic films. But harkening back to those originals, Dawn of the Dead was followed by Day of the Dead, and I think if Zack Snyder came on board to do a Day of the Dead reboot or sequel to Dawn of the Dead, there's plenty of fun to be had there. I'm very iffy when it comes to the zombie genre, but the way that it was approached in those movies, both the classics and Zack Snyder's remake, is the way that I prefer my zombie movies to be. And give us another contained story of characters trapped inside of their base while zombies are surrounding the premises, and they have to come up with a way to fight them, combat them, while at the same time sort of having conflict that builds from within. So at this point, they're fighting not only each other, but the zombies outside. I want to see more of these zombies that aren't just slow and sluggish and don't really have any motivation. Give me more of these zombie hybrids that still have speed, still have strength and agility and all these things. Make it horrifying, make it big, make it an action movie. While it's very unlikely that at this point in his career, Zack Snyder would sign on to do a sequel for the movie, there's still plenty of potential there. And if it ever came a day that they were to carry on this story, carry on these remakes, I'm all here for it. At number 7, I'm going with Killer Klowns from Outer Space, another cult classic that is not a good movie by any means, but it is plenty of fun. And I think in this era of horror movies, and really for many decades now, clowns and horror have had this big appeal that when you mash them together and promote it as a big studio horror movie, people are going to have their butt in the seat to watch it. Even the smaller budget clown movies are successful. I mean, look at Terrifier in recent years. That is an indie horror film with an extremely small budget that has been very, very successful. Killer Klowns from Outer Space is another example of a requel that could happen. I think if it was marketed right and enough quality was put into the movie, both the fans of the originals and newcomers would have a lot of fun with it. The original creators have also been trying to get a sequel off the ground for quite some time now, even at one point trying to expand into a television show, but just nothing has been able to get off the ground. Now recently they have come out with the Killer Klowns of Outer Space video game, so the interest is still there. It's just about finding a studio that would be willing to take a chance with it. But there's enough creepy and over-the-top elements there that I think with a bigger budget and, again, modern technology would actually make a final product that could be both extremely entertaining and very horrifying. At number 6, I've got to go with Creep 2. Again, I think Creep 3 has been trying to get off the ground for quite some time now, but whether it's script issues or studio issues, there's been some sort of pushback in one section or another that has prevented the movie from coming out at this point. But I think that this is a very, very fun set of movies that warrants an expansion and that is in desperate need of an ending. The way that the movies are filmed in that handheld sort of found footage style work very well. They're able to be made on a very small budget, and I think if you bring Mark Duplass back for a third one, maybe expand on his character, what his motives are, where he comes from a little bit, and maybe sort of come up with a way to end things in a satisfying manner, it would make a lot of sense. While the movies don't really have a massive audience, I think that it's already established that cult following that if you made a third one, people are going to show up, people are going to support it, and even if it doesn't do very well in theaters, it's going to have a second life on streaming. Creep 3 is deserved, it's needed. If Mark Duplass and Patrick Brice are willing to come back for this third one, if they're ever able to get it off the ground, I'll be excited for it. Kicking off the top 5 is the remake of Friday the 13th from 2009. Say what you want about this movie, I am a massive defender of it, and I think that it does a lot of things very, very well. It takes the franchise in a more serious direction with more brutal kills and just a more believable story with performances that make you buy into it more. The Friday 13th franchise is hit or miss for me. I've never been extremely attached to the franchise and praised it like so many people do. So when we got this remake, while it wasn't very well received whatsoever, I found myself enjoying it quite a bit just because it amped up the brutality. It was darker, it was more grittier, and it really just took the franchise in a direction that I think it needed to go in from the very beginning. I understand why fans of the originals love those so much, but in an era to where we're getting all of these reboots already, it saddens me that this one didn't get any sort of expansion from that first movie in 2009, and I know that the rights are all over the place with different legal issues and troubles going on, but if they can somehow find a studio that will house this franchise, then I'd love to see a continuation in this direction. I know it's been a long time since 2009, but if you can at least get that Jason back for another movie, that's all I'm asking for. At number 4, I have Wes Craven's New Nightmare. Obviously, Wes Craven is no longer with us, but the idea that he created here, I think, is what he's most iconic for, which is both adding the slasher brutality with a mix of self-awareness that pairs very well together. There's few that can infuse those two things as well as he was able to. But with The New Nightmare, where you have this concept where all of the actors are playing their real selves, and in this universe, the Nightmare on Elm Street movies were just fictional, and as time passes, the things from those fictional movies start to bleed into this altered reality. Get Heather Langenkamp back, get Robert Englund back, and make a sequel to it. I think it works very well. There's endless possibilities. The fact that all they have to do is play themselves and they can sort of mesh that reality with this fantasy world. At the end of the movie, she defeated Freddy, but we know good and well, Freddy always comes back. And I think it's been proven with the resurgence of the Scream franchise that there are other visionaries out there that can somewhat capture the vision of Wes Craven while honoring his legacy and the things that he established throughout his career. In fact, bring in Radio Silence to direct and write the movie, and I think you would have a finished product that is enjoyable. Let's make it happen. Kicking off the top 3 is It Follows. This is a film that on its own is one of the best horror movies we've gotten in the past couple decades. The concept that it deals with is very chilling, very unnerving, and it works in a lot of ways. It's not only culturally relevant, but it's also just unique enough that it really made an impact with viewers. Dealing with the idea of the terrors of sexually transmitted disease and how in this film, it establishes this entity that really cannot be stopped. Sure, you can pass it on, but can you ever really kill it? And with the resolution of this first movie, if you call it that, it sets itself up nicely for a continuation where you've got another group of characters that is dealing with this same entity that is passed on through more sexual contact. And maybe in the mix, you establish more of what this thing is, where it comes from, possibly expand on the idea of how it can be stopped. While I don't think it's needed or 100% necessary, because I think as a film, It Follows stands alone incredibly well, the potential for a continuation is definitely there. My runner-up is Child's Play from 2019, another movie that fans of the original Child's Play movies just seem to absolutely hate. And honestly, as a fan of the franchise, I don't understand where the hate's coming from. Yeah, they made a lot of creative changes, and Don Mancini is not attached to this movie, but does that mean that the film is not worthy of being appreciated for what it actually did well? Absolutely not. Not only did it exceed at reintroducing the concept in a modern world, but I think also it was packed with a ton of dark humor that I really loved and gorish kills that for the most part were very, very well executed. I dug the style, I dug the characters, I loved Mark Hamill as the voice of Chucky, and I think in a world full of technology, and especially in a period of time to where AI continues to get more and more complex and used in our everyday lives, there's plenty of room for development from where they've already started. Do I think it's ever going to happen? Absolutely not. Just because so many people hated the movie and bombed it because it wasn't exactly what they made it up to be in their heads, what they wanted it to be, how they wanted it to be done, because they tried to gatekeep the original so much that they said, you know what, this should not be touched, it should never be remade, so we're just not going to support it. But I think there was plenty of foundation and building blocks set up in that first movie that could be built upon in an interesting way. Have Chucky be more cynical. Play around with the element of the artificial intelligence aspect, and I think there's plenty of fun to be had. Hate me if you want. But at my number one, I have to go with Trick or Treat, a Halloween anthology story that feels like it's ripped off the pages of a horror graphic novel. And I think right now, in this time to where the biggest Halloween franchise, Halloween, just ended, just wrapped it up. We don't know when we're going to get another one of those movies, if we ever do. Horror fans are going to be itching for something to look forward to on a yearly basis. I think Trick or Treat being a Halloween anthology story bodes well for more stories to tell, especially considering Sam is already a very celebrated figure within the horror realm, an icon in a lot of ways. The first movie was very well received, and it's already garnered a massive cult following that I have no idea why they haven't made a follow-up to that first movie already. I feel like there should be quite a few of them by now, especially considering the success of the VHS franchise and those movies that have continued to come out, especially over the past few years. And while they haven't made a big splash in the box office by any means, their place found on streaming has been very well received. A lot of people tune in to watch those movies. Trick or Treat warrants a theatrical release, I believe, and it's just the perfect thing for the Halloween season. If you get the right people on board and enough interesting stories to tell, this would be a huge success and one that I would absolutely be excited for. But anyways, guys, those are my top 10 horror movies that I believe deserve a sequel. I know this list is going to be controversial. I know there's probably a lot of movies that I missed as well. So do me a favor and comment down below and let me know other movies that you think should get a sequel or a reboot or a requel or whatever you want to call it, or tell me why you think my picks are wrong, because that's totally fine. I'd like to start a discussion down in the comments. But as always, thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure to leave a like on the video and subscribe if you haven't already. And until next time, I'll see y'all later. Peace out.